So Tom Colicchio, in addition to what I had mentioned earlier, Tom was also executive producer of the film A Place at the Table. And if you have not seen it, you must. It's a very powerful film about hunger in America. I can say that after seeing that film, it made me push to publish an article in National Geographic on hunger in America, and I thank you for that inspiration. You are, in addition to your work as a chef and as an author, you're also trying to change the landscape of food in New York City. Why don't you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Just quickly going to the film, if you haven't seen it, there's one scene, and I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the film where we're in Mississippi and there's a teacher who was diagnosed with diabetes, and she decides that she doesn't want to go on medication, she wants to change her diet. And then she decides to take sort of what she's sort of teaching herself about food and bring it to the classroom. And there's a scene where she has a melon, and these kids have never seen a melon. And she cuts it up, and you just see the students light up. And then the idea was that after that, they would go home and teach their parents and tell them that they want healthier food. And you know, I didn't plan on coming here today. I found myself in DC last night and decided to attend because I wanted to be in the audience and listen. So I have a great front row seat right here and listening to so many great things. And so I'm only here till 12 o'clock, so I had to go on one of the first two panels, and so this made perfect sense. But and I say that kind of half jokingly, but you know, I thought about it, and I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and my grandfather was an urban gardener. And it wasn't until we started working on a project in New York to grow in New York that I realized this. He would grow tomatoes, zucchini, and peppers, and a few other things in 5-gallon five-gallon containers. He would just load it up with soil, and he grew. And so from a young age, I sort of watched things grow in an urban setting. I never much thought about it. I assumed every grandfather did this. This is what my grandfather was doing. And my grandfather was also a forager. He worked for PSE&G, it's the utility service in New Jersey, and he was a truck driver, and he would, when they were putting power lines up in northern New Jersey, he would go foraging for mushrooms and stuff, and would come home and cook them up. And it was kind of interesting because I always remembered he had a method for figuring out whether or not they were poisonous or not. And he would put a little water in a pan and put some of the mushrooms in there and put a penny in the nickel. And he said if any of them turned colors, and he knew they were poisonous. And my grandfather's no longer with us, but it wasn't the mushrooms that did it. My mother also ran a school lunch program in New Jersey as well, and I remember her. She was getting a little older and complaining that she was always tired, and we were trying to get her to retire. And you know, I never thought much about the job that she was doing. I mean, occasionally I would pop in to see her when I was in school, and I always knew that if I got in trouble, I was really in trouble because they would take me to her, not the principal. And so, but when I was trying to get her to retire, she said, you know, I'm not ready yet. I said, you know, I think it's time. And I assumed she was going there for, you know, social time at school. But she kind of floored me with her response, and I always remember this. And she said, I know if I leave, I fight every day to bring fresh produce into this school cafeteria. And this is going back in the 80s. Fight every single day. I know if I leave, this is going to go completely institutional. And again, never thought much about it when she said this, but then later on in life, it always sort of stuck with me. And so, how, you know, and I think you know, what's going on here at the school and what's going on at so many schools, how do you connect kids back to how do we grow things, what food's about, why it's important? Not only why it's important for nutritional reasons, but the social aspect of eating together, which is pretty much gone from society these days. I mean, when I was a kid, I had to be home at a certain hour for dinner. And so how does food connect not only our ability to sustain ourselves through better nutrition, to answer the obesity question, But how do we create more of a social fabric around food as well? Which is why I started, I should say we started gardening in New York. And it kind of happened as a conversation. Let's grow a few things just to try to see what happens, and not expecting much. And we were working on a project. It didn't happen on a roof for various reasons. We couldn't do it. And then about 5 years ago, we got involved in a project on the east side. It's a restaurant called River Park, and it's a large development. It's a life science building, and there was the plan was to build 3 towers. And the first tower went up, and that's where the restaurant was. And we were trying to work out another deal to put a garden on a garage rooftop. And someone from the organization, the developer, realized that, and this is sometimes where policy works, and it was our good fortune. They decided not to break ground on a second tower because of the economy. And they found that if there was a policy for stalled construction projects. And so if you actually repurpose that land, you were able to keep your permits in place. So you didn't have to go reapply. And so it was about 3 years that passed between when they had the permit for the property and they actually built. So they actually did build. But so we went to them and said, listen, how about a farm? How about a working garden? And we worked with Grow NYC, and we developed a system. We grow in milk crates. We have 8,000 milk crates. We have a burlap sack in the milk crate. There's soil. There's irrigation. Last year, we grew about 25 tons of food. This is inside of the East River, overlooking the highway. And it's completely changed the way that you see the cooks, and they have to go out there and tend the garden, but you see the way they interact with food. And so, to me, it's just a good example on how policy can actually jumpstart some of these ideas. But it's also a ton of work. And so we're talking about large companies and how they can exploit the $11 billion sort of food and lunch budget. But at some point, how do we turn these urban gardens into a business? Because at a certain point, it can't be sort of fun and games. How do we do it? So Morgan's figured out how to make a business out of it. But how do we make businesses out of this? How do we actually create these environments where we can grow and people can actually make a living? Because this is why people are leaving farms. This is why they're leaving rural areas. They can't make a living in farms anymore. They're coming to the city. So how can they use what they know, what they sort of grew up with, and actually create a model for business, so they can sell to restaurants, so they can sell to schools. And then what role does government play? How does government create the markets? How do they mandate that for the school lunch system, a certain amount of that has to be local? And so now farmers, and if they're really local in cities, can actually use this as a business opportunity as well.